It's not to mean anybody's less smart. It's what we're smart in. Because I'm really impressed with the speakers here and some of the people I'm hearing discussing things, technology and such. And I learn a lot from these things. You know, I'm not claiming to be like the #1 hacker. I think someone else tried that, and let's not go there. Actually, I think I checked my number for hacker. It's an irrational number. Moving along. Okay, you're rolling? All right, cool. All right. Basically, working title, when domain names look like spaghetti or whatever. Now, this is an emerging issue. So if you haven't seen some of the stuff I'm talking about, don't worry. You haven't missed things. It's something that may be a little ahead of the curve in the United States. But you're likely to see it if you're dealing with anything crossing the globe, international stuff. Okay, introductions about me, about the presentation. Okay, one of the big things I do is open source intelligence. I do some of that at work, and also I do it as a, if you will, professional avocation and hobby. I'll dig into stuff, like something hits the tech press, the news, and I don't like just taking what they say. Like there are things been about certain hacker tools or criminal hacking tools. You know, say in Russia or such, and the press might say one thing. I try to find out a little bit more what's going on. Is this something that's being hyped or whatever? So it's open source intelligence in the networked world, and the alphabet soup reference, if you notice that bowl has some interesting acronyms, you know, TCP, IP, SNA, etc., because I dabble in languages. I love language. I grew up with Latvian as my first language, then learned English, a bit of French, German, abyssal Yiddish, Hebrew, working on Arabic and Russian. I'm not fluent in them. There's, you know, a 5-year-old kid from Lebanon or from St. Petersburg will out-talk me any day of the week. I'm hoping to get really good at it. But for navigating my way around the network world, I can deal with it. The one hazard is that a couple things happen. One, alphabet soup sometimes is just a meal. There's a classic Frank and Ernest cartoon showing the two characters in a CIA cafeteria, and one staring intently at his bowl of soup, the other's going, Ernest, it's alphabet soup, not a code to crack. But that's an occupational hazard. Now, you haven't seen my keyboard. You're welcome to come and look at it afterwards. But this is a little snippet of my keyboard. I don't know how clearly you can see it. But it's equipped to do Hebrew, Arabic, as well as Latin alphabet. And I can also do Cyrillic. I just don't have room to put extra characters on my keyboard. I call it the keyboard that's going to get me in trouble when I travel internationally. One border or another's going to say, you have what on there? Now, this presentation is the outgrowth of an article I wrote for Digital Forensics Investigator News back in July. And that article actually was an outgrowth of my interest in languages, my interest in information security, and the networked world, because I see a lot of things going on across borders, you know, transcending borders, be it good things. There's some great projects going on across the world. And so it's not all bad. In fact, there's a lot more good out there, but there's also some bad stuff. And there are some new developments where certain assumptions we've had all these years, comfortable assumptions for us in the English-speaking world, you know, like, oh, everybody uses a standard QWERTY keyboard. Careful with that. United States, UK, you're okay with that. You start to get into certain parts of the world and it gets interesting, quite interesting. So the overview, I'm going to show some information about internationalized domain names in the wild after explaining what that means. ASCII compatible encoding such as punny code, and that's very useful to know about. Going to look at some of the challenges of IDN for investigators and analysts. By the way, investigators can also be people just trying to check out something's coming in on spam or something I found in this programming code. It looks like obfuscation, but I'm not sure. You might encounter it that way. I'm going to look at how some of the common net tools handle IDN or don't handle it, finding who is info for domain names with IDNs, and at the end, the issue I found the most discussion about IDNs in the security field has been something called homograph attacks, using lookalike characters. Interesting enough, the biggest volume of IDN discussion is marketing. When I go looking online, I go to various forums. Most of the people are talking about how to use these non-English, non-standard ASCII domain names for marketing overseas. Quickie terms, labels. So if I refer to a label, it's a part of a domain name or a URL, like the www in www.DojoCon.org is a label. The DojoCon is another label. .org is a label. The .org is a top-level domain. Then we have country code top-level domains. For right now, most people have seen things like .uk, .ru, .de, all the .us. We're very comfortable with those. It's easy telling what country is associated with that domain name. It gets interesting now. IDN, Internationalized Domain Name, is a means of making domain names that can have letters that are not your usual standard ASCII. This is to suit local languages and scripts. Unicode, I'm not going to go into detail, but Unicode made a lot of things possible for working across languages. What was it? Late 80s, early 90s, for Hebrew studies, for studying the Hebrew scriptures. I had to get special software for the PC, had to use code pages. It got very crazy, and when you tried to work with multiple languages, you want to do Hebrew, Arabic, Russian, and English, you had to juggle a lot of things. Unicode came along, and it gave a way for encoding characters, code points for all kinds of scripts. So you could, most obvious, of course, were a regular ASCII for Latin alphabet, extended ASCII for different characters, Cyrillic, Arabic, Greek, and so on. ACE, ASCII compatible encoding, because not everything we use for connecting the networks, in fact, much of it doesn't understand Unicode. It's built in a days of ASCII. So ACE was a method to make encodings that could be turned back into Unicode. You could take Unicode, turn it into ACE, and come back to Unicode. Honeycode RFC 3492 describes the process. I'm not even going to try to describe how it's done. It's rather arcane. There's probably some savant out there, you can throw them anything and they go, oh yeah, this is XN dash blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so these are the terms. Now, I'm going to take a little simplifying step back. Phone books. I know they're disappearing. A few years from now, people are going to go, what's a phone book? I just use the computer, I use my mobile device. But phone books, those quaint paper items. Imagine if you had a phone book that had the usual English, but the phone company decided to extend it more, make it more user-friendly for ethnic communities, for immigrant communities. And so Ivana Petrov could have her entry not only in English or Latin characters, but also in Cyrillic. Ahmed Yusuf could have it in Arabic, and so on. Someone could have it in Korean. The Chinese restaurant not only has an entry in Latin alphabet, but also to help Chinese people find that restaurant, has it in Chinese, both simplified and traditional. Chinese gets very interesting for encodings. And some people might go, oh man, what's going on? I'm getting confused. Well, first of all, you have the phenomena that a lot of people would have entries in Latin as well as a foreign language, but the biggest item is they're still united by the phone number. The number does not change. Now coming to the networked world, on a machine level, Unicode is there. You know, it's the same Unicode. You know, when you're dealing with the binary, the hexadecimal, it's the same things you've been dealing all along, as long as you know about Unicode. For internet communications, you still got the IP, TCP/IP, and all that. Your biggest factor is going to be IPv6, but that's independent of all this going on. Domain names now come in many sizes and shapes. There was some interesting place called DojoCon.org. All right, that's you know, very typical .com Latin alphabet domain. The register.co.uk is a good example of something that has a country code, .uk. The next one, Gindi.com. Gindi.com is an Israeli belongs to an Israeli land real estate firm. There's a good example. It's a .com, Latin alphabet, but the first label is Bevrit in Hebrew. The next one I'm not even going to try to pronounce. My Korean does not go beyond food names and things like Annyeonghaseyo. Then you have a site about beer, Pivnaya.rf in Russia, totally in Cyrillic. Next one is an Arabic IDN, both the top level domain and the site itself are in Arabic. Now if you got something like that, you found on a slip of paper, say, dealing with some sort of thing going on, someone had it in a text, you might be going, what is this? This just looks like spaghetti. Like even, what country is it associated? You might know it's Arabic, but if you don't read Arabic, where does it go? How do you even use it? I mean, the first freak out might be, how do I type it in? But we'll get to it. Yes. Or people will contact me, hey, John, hey, what's going on with that? stu.edu.cn is a Chinese, I forget which university, something like Shantung University. I show that because the next one is in Chinese. That's a live domain name for that university. And the last one is an example of punny code. How many have seen a punny code? The XN -- followed by what might look like, I don't know, you might have trouble seeing it, but it's like XN -- followed by letters like P, S, S, C, etc., etc. Okay, no one's seen them yet. Okay, you're maybe either very early on this, or maybe fortunate in some ways. But that is a rendition, that's an ASCII compatible encoding of that Chinese domain name. This is just to show that these things aren't just like somewhere in the esoteric networking. This, the lighting's poor, but the arrows are pointing to that Hebrew.com, that Gindi.com web address on a billboard in Israel. Now, so it makes it a lot easier. Now, someone might wonder, well, if they can do the www and the .com, why have the Hebrew or whatever? Well, one of the reasons can be you might connect the name more easily to typing it out in Hebrew than thinking, how do I transliterate the name? Good example in Arabic, thank you. Is it Jamal or Gamal? You know, or it's like there's certain letters and things. Transliteration can be very interesting. All right. Where things got really interesting, up to May of 2010, you could do the .com, .org type of IDNs where the other label was in a non-ASCII form. What happened is, in May 2010, after ICANN went through a whole process, first 4 countries came on board where they could register domains under top-level country code domains in their own native script. United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the Russian Federation. One of the reasons for 3 Arabic countries was that there's a big interest in getting Arabic as the first type of script covered because it covers a lot of countries in the world. Russia is also a big country, but it's pretty much one country. The Russian Cyrillic does open the way for other countries that use Cyrillic. For example, Serbia is coming on board. It's got its own Cyrillic top-level domain.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Sure.
Are the Arabic TLDs, are they written in reverse like the languages? Because I noticed you have the name and dot.
Oh yes, good point. I'm glad you asked that. There's a slide later on that shows it. But this is one of the things that can really confound things. Because there's the beginning, that's, what is it, Amarat. You read it from here this way. Same thing for Saudi Arabia. What is it? Asaud. Russia is reads just like regular Latin languages, and Masa for Egypt. So this is part of the thing that can make it really fun, and we'll get to it. And by the way, thank you for asking questions. I was concerned that at this late hour in the day, I would hear the thunking of heads hitting the back of the chair in front of them. So good audience. And this summer has been a busy summer. Chinese country code top-level domains are on the fast track, and some of them are live. PRC, got 2. Oh, Chinese is an interesting one because Chinese and characters can be encoded 2 ways on computers. Traditional, which is a little more fancy script, and more modern, simplified. And I'm not an expert in Oriental, Far Eastern languages, so don't ask me further on it. But one thing I will insert, that I have heard that before IDNs came out, that some students in Chinese universities, along with sysadmins, had set up private IDN-type networks because, you can do the DNS, you can set it up and route it. It was just not accessible to the world. But among the university folks, it worked very nicely. More Arabic IDNs came up. Another script that's a little more exotic for many people in the West, a Thai script. It's for Thailand. Sri Lanka has its own writing. And this is not, any disparagement. It was just at my first glance at that, the writing for Sri Lanka, I thought, oh, this reminded me of Klingon writing. Being a Star Trek fan, it's more a reflection of my geekdom than on Sri Lanka. And I looked at IANA's database this morning, and I counted with my bleary eyes 15 IDN top-level country codes listed now. There's also test ones too. And I'm taking a quick look, showing some things from Google's search. You can do copy and paste, but you have to be careful how copy and paste works. With right-to-left languages like Hebrew and Arabic, what happens is you start highlighting the cursor moving, and if there's another type of character like a period or left to right type of character system, the highlighting suddenly goes weird, jumps. So you have to make sure you got everything. But I did a few searches, and one of the things I was looking at is how many hits I got by doing a site and then the top-level domain. For Egypt right now, it's about 7,500 hits. Okay, it's a start. China, this is the People's Republic of China using, what is that? Not sure if simplified or traditional, got a 113,000 results. So, Russia is very interesting. That's been a fast grower. It actually was a little surprising because many Russians I had heard from were sort of skeptical, like we don't want to be backwatered from the rest of the world. You know, there was a worry that if people were locked into a Russian-only type of network, that they'd be more isolated, but it's picked up, especially November 11th. The Russian domain registry allowed people, non-governmental entities, to register. And I think within 3 hours, 100,000 registrations were done. By November 18th, it was, as I recollect, 500,000. You know, people have registered things for advertising. Like the second hit is actually for one of the major petroleum and gas, natural gas. Gazprom is a biggie there. Oops, that's not supposed to happen. That's known as hit the wrong key. So my life is flashing before me, at least in the past few minutes. Oh no! Yeah, this is without the after-hours belts of vodka and such. You know, just if anyone's heading up 95, I will be driving up that road to go back to New Jersey, but I'll be sober. Okay, it was there. And punny code. Okay. DNS, as I mentioned before, uses punny code. It translates those Unicode characters if it encounters things that aren't your traditional ASCII, for lack of a better term. It will translate them into punny code, which you see that XN below. By the way, for knowing where the domain's top level domain is, one of the advantages of punny code is that it reads just like regular Western text from left to right. So you look at the first label, okay, there's a dot. You see an XN again, okay, that is the top level domain. So even if you don't know which one of these two labels here is top level domain, you've got this. Very important, one of the distinctive trait of punny code is that XN and 2 dashes. Very important. And I emphasize this. This is one thing I wish I had thought of when I wrote my article back this summer, is if you're doing any investigations or documenting anything involving IDN, get a copy of the punny code, and I'll tell you in a moment how to do it. But get the punny code and keep that on hand, because that is less likely to get mangled by our applications, by our tools, and such. And let's see. Where is it? Good. Punny code, here we go. There are several tools out there. I had found one in Germany I liked, but this one, VeriSign, Domain Name Services, has a nice converter. And in fact, you see me having done a little bit of work there. I plugged in some Chinese domain name and let it convert, and there's a punny code. They say you can do a whois query. It might not work. If it's a IDN with a .com, it might work. But some of these will not work. But at least this way, you got both. Or the other way around. You got a punny code and wondering what it is, plug it in, and you'll be able to use it. By the way, for web addresses and such, contact me when via contact info I'll give at the end. And I'll be glad to send you more info on it. Right. There we go. Yeah, there's a picture of that same tool I was showing a moment ago. Problems and challenges. First, realizing it's a domain name. It's like you might see it somewhere, like the Arabic or the Thai or others, and you're not sure, is it a domain name or what? If you see an HTTP : / at least you know, okay, this is a URL. Or you might see an @ sign. Email addresses are coming. The big challenge is email clients. They're not ready to handle IDN quite yet. But that's going to come. So someday you may see an email from overseas that might be totally in Cyrillic except for the @ sign and the period. Yeah. So, but the other problem, as we saw with the Arabic ones, which end is the CCTLD? Which one's the country code? It's like there's a cartoon of, it's a little gross, someone picks up one of these little furry dogs that looks like a big ball of hair and is about to bring it to face, and here's a barking from the other end. It's like, oops, we didn't know which way it goes. You know, it can be messy at times. Okay, and there's a little Arabic-English pun. Well, in a moment. What country of registry? Same problem. You know, like you don't have the nice .ru, .d, and so on. And sad, because I couldn't find the sad key. It's again, Arabic-English pun with that letter, which is, how do I enter that Unicode? You know, I have a computer set up, I can do several languages, but if I had Chinese before me, I can't do it. You know, that can be a big hurdle in some cases. Maybe if you have it in electronic form, little friends known as copy and paste can be of help. But if you do that, make sure you have highlighted the whole thing, especially with certain languages, because the highlighting can go very weird. And that's where the next item comes in. Many tools don't work correctly with some IDNs. And at the end, I'll be covering homograph attacks. That's been a big concern among the people, although there's others say it might be hype, a bit of FUD. This is the fun with right-to-left URLs. All right, this is a live URL. Okay, there's a protocol. All right, it's a HTTP protocol. All right, that's easy enough. Go from left to right. Oh, wait, what happens here? Oh, we start here and go this way. We go right to left. Oh, their file structure on the server has naming in Latin. And you now go left to right. By the way, a little hint. If you ever deal with trying to figure out some of the foreign websites, like how they're set up, because the language of technology is still dominated by English, sometimes look at the links, look at the URLs they point to. Like you might not, which link is for a forum? You can't figure it out. Then you look at the URL being displayed in the status bar. Oh, it's /forum.asp or PHP. No problem. Downloads. So sometimes I find that happens, that you can figure out how these sites work. Oh, again. Yeah, in the dark. So you're getting a slight preview. Okay, come on. Computer's running slow. Good. All right, that looks like where we were. And not all our tools are IDN ready.
I have a big question.
Yes.
Or a question for the IDNs, I guess.
Yes.
So you said that, when you go from one of the Chinese or any of the languages, then the DNS translates that into the Punicode.
Exactly.
And I saw kind of like convention of the Punicode. I don't know if it's xn dot something dash dash xn and then like 5 or 6 characters.
Yeah.
Now, is there a converter?
Yes. The converter I
from
showed.
that Punicode into something I can read?
Oh. This is a little, okay. Yes and no. That VeriSign page and similar tools I showed. You can put the punny code in, and it will render it back into Unicode. But if the Unicode is something you can't read because you're not used to the language, the closest thing you can do is actually go to Google Translate or any similar translator and put in, at least get a name, idea of what the name means. But the Unicode is what they named that, what the domain name is. Only thing after that is you can go to things like IP addresses related to that Unicode, to that domain, to that IDN. But what they mean, this slide simply was a little foray into Windows, CMD, CLI, which I try to avoid when I'm dealing with this type of issue from command line, because Windows command line is not Unicode friendly for this type of thing. It will render boxes or little question marks if I put a domain name that's in Cyrillic. You have to give it a change code page command. You have to change the code page to 65001 for it to handle Unicode. Oh, and then also you have to change the font, because normally the default is raster font. Set it to Lucidia Console. So I'd rather work with this type of stuff in Linux or other operating systems. And a moment, I'll show you there. Okay. I have some already prepped into the history rather than trying to type it in the dark or copy and paste. But I copied and pasted from that earlier Russian site's lookup from Google, the Gazprom.rf URL. Now here's, domain name. I hit enter. This is a problem. It can't handle it. So, okay. Don't bang my head with the microphone. That act has already been done. Quite well, I mind you. Okay. And I'm going to that VeriSign page, and I just put in that Gazprom, making sure it's the type is for native characters. Hit convert. All right, you did it. Now I take the results and make sure I get that whole thing, that xn, dash, etc. And get a copy. And now we've got something. It works, and by the way, this will also work with other commands like ping, dig. You can, and even whois, it will work. I'll get to that in a moment, but I just wanted to show you something with these commands. There now you know how to complain about the Russian gas bill. That's, yeah. Interesting enough, the one exception with the Unicode I found lately, depending on the country, upon the registry, you can also do it with the Unicode. But most of the commands we use, dig, nslookup, ping, traceroute, they really work with the punny code. A few years from now, they might do the conversion on the fly. They might just realize, oh, this is what you're trying to do. Handle it all, and no problems. But our tools, it's still young. This is a new thing for many of us. And okay, I'm not going to go through all of them. I just showed you the basic principle. You can use a punny code with the common tools. The whois can be tricky at times. It depends on things like who's handling the registry and other factors. So, if you do have trouble, a couple options. One of them is you use a punny code. You can use nslookup or other tools, get the IP address associated with it. And then you do a whois on that IP address, find out what block it's in, find out the contacts, etc. So if you do get Russian spam, and that's one of the things I tend to get at work is Russian spam, for some strange reason. It's like, oh, give it to John, he'll figure out what it's about. It's good fun. Some of it, nothing really, no porn spam, interesting enough. I guess, I don't know what that says about my employer's profile. It's things like selling goods, services, moving stuff. Another option is the IANA. It's got a database that is very handy. And let's see. Oh, this is going to be a little difficult seeing because they love to use this light blue text. But this stores the root zone information. All right, going for IBM. All right. You have the active IDN CCTLDs listed there. And no, it actually shows up better over there. But you can see them, and they are linked. So I'm going to pick on Russia. Nothing about Russia per se, it's just I know where it goes, so it's not going to, okay. The surfaces, okay. And IANA keeps a delegation record. By the way, that PONI code up there is the PONI code for the country code top level domain name, the label. That's the .rf in the Cyrillic rendered PONI code, and you can find out, coordination center, administrative contacts, technical contacts, but you go further, name servers, subdomain info, and a subdomain info can be very useful because it can give you URL for registration services and the whois server. By the way, if you use a registration server, registration services, sometimes that's very handy because they have a whois. Very often, just like Aaron.net, RIPE.net, and others, there's a whois field on their page. And if you haven't dealt with foreign language sites, some people I know, they first look at it and go, I can't do anything with it. It's in Russian or whatever. Take a moment and look carefully at some of these sites, especially for these network administration sites. This is rather comforting. Whois? It's in Latin alphabet. It's a standard technical terminology around the world. And you can plug in the domain name in there. And they'll give you the whois info. Some of the text around it will be in their native language, but again, most of the core information is going to be in Latin alphabet. That's very helpful. Someday it might change, and we're going to have a very interesting time. Very interesting time. I don't think yet anyone's going to send me for Chinese classes to cram. If they send me to a good Chinese restaurant, I might cram then, but that's more Mugu Gaipan. Yeah, we saw this already. And this is where I pulled up the Gazprom information. I just cobbled together a clip from their page, and the whois is on the right-hand side. There it is in Latin alphabet, domain names, different information. No problem. Okay, and now we're coming into the last portion, the fun portion. This is like the optometrist. Is it better this way, or better that way, or better? Oh, that's better. No. Are these sets of characters the same? And by looking at them, unless you're a real font buff, and there are font buffs, who play, name that font. Oh, that's Arial. No, that's Verdana. Can you top this font? Actually, I can't even tell from here. Sometimes you can. Yeah, what did you say? The K?
EKE.
Good. Excellent. You got better eyesight than I do, and that's wonderful. But those are subtle. But the average person, if they saw these characters appearing in middle of a name of a site they considered trustworthy, they wouldn't catch it. It's not until you remember what I said, that the underlying codes really are the things that you can really find out the truth. The first set, these are rather, this is hexadecimal. This is rather high, 0, 4, 10. This is not your normal characters, your ASCII character values. The one below, okay, the capital A is 0041. All right, that's more reasonable. So that can be one of the ways you can tell. If you were dealing with examination, say, of suspect text files, and you brought them up in a hex viewer or other tools, what I would love to see develop is a good plugin or some sort of function in browsers that could say, hey, you set your computer for English. Do you know that there's a mixture of English and Cyrillic on here? Maybe, would word it in something more user understandable, but it would warn you when there's a mixture, because this is very easy to do on the computer level. The way Firefox and some others chose to do it is, it's got Unicode in the URL, it got Unicode in the domain, use Punycode. So people might look up, I thought that was PayPal. How come I'm getting all this XN and bleep, bleep, blight? And I'll get to that in a, yes, Mark? Yes, thank you.
Have you noticed some applications that show the font differently? Like a while back I was trying to hide stuff in my Twitter post by using Unicode characters, and I noticed if I put it in Firefox, it came out looking pretty good. Hard to tell that it wasn't. If I threw it into Internet Explorer, or at least if I viewed the tweets in Internet Explorer, it was all jacked up. Have you noticed some applications that...
I notice they vary. I'm not sure if that's done as a security feedback, or is it simply variable handling of Unicode and mixed character sets. That's a good question. I'll have to look at it. I don't have the only one I really was aware of is that forced Punycode in the address bar for navigation. But in a moment, I'll get to why that might not work as well. Oh, by the way, I admire these guys for their cleverness. That URL, that domain name, is all Latin, but they did a visual pun. The first label is hacker in Russian. It's simply it's a transliteration of the English word hacker. There's another word for hacker when it's referring to someone who cracks into systems. What is it, Vislam or something like that. But this magazine, it's a little bit like 2600. It's like an info security and hacking news magazine. I thought, cool, they hacked the language, and in a good sense. Homograph attack concerns. Various people have raised it. One of them is Eric Johansson, who raised it back, 5 years ago at the DojoCon. He had done a presentation. He showed how he registered a PayPal look-alike, and how people could be spoofed out. Currently has another spoof homograph registration. If you look up his paper, it's in the end of my DFI article. I have the link to his paper and his site. You'll find Gesundheit. You'll find more info. But a lot of people I know on various cyber investigator lists, when they were hearing about the homograph attacks on IDNs, there was an interesting split among Americans and European participants on this list. Some of the Americans go, oh man, people could do all kinds of horrible things. This is going to be horrible. The Europeans tend to be, maybe having umlauts and all the accents and all that, you don't sweat this as much. You had to deal with different languages. But there was such a big worry that substitution of lookalike characters would become common, and how well the registrars would work to prevent obvious fraud. There was a lot of worry. But here's the interesting thing. The Anti-Phishing Working Group, Global Phishing Survey, first half of 2010, noted that the last true homograph attack they saw was in 2009, and that was a hotmail.net lookalike. But that's the only one. Their theory, 2 reasons. The phishers did not find it economically worth their while to go for, registering IDNs, going out of their way, when what they were using already was doing quite a fine job. It's like, why change the bait when you're catching enough fish and you're fishing? And the other thing, how many people look up at the bar, to see, things like the Firefox warning you. It's like you could have qzyh.net. People, I'll click on it anyway. It's giving me the video I want, or a download I want, the codecs, whatever. And that brings us to questions. If any? Okay, I see one question there.
How do you take directly from the Unicode itself, or is it from some type of database that it's pulling the pointers from?
It's derived. There's an algorithm, and the RFC that I mentioned briefly, if you look at it, it describes the algorithm. It's not one I can do in my head. That's why I made that comment about a savant, but there's a whole algorithm. I can't compare it to hashing because it's not one-way. It's a two-way function, but it works very nicely. Yes?
When did you say the Russian answer came out so?
Well, okay, the government came on, sorry.
When did that become available?
The government, the Russian government, the Russian Federation started issuing RF, the Cyrillic top-level domain registrations for its government sites back around May. But on November 11th, they opened it up for non-governmental entities, and that's when there was a big rush.
The reason I asked is the Buddhist page got shown that the site was created in 2009.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably just I can see another reason. And thank you for mentioning it, because when you start comparing the who is for info and the IP address, you begin to find that the registration, the IDN, often overlaps its history with the Latin domain registration, the .ru. So this is where it gets a little tricky, because if you do an NS lookup, say on using the punny code, like I did elsewhere for that Chinese university, I get an IP address. I plug it, do an NS lookup on the IP address, and I get the Latin version of the domain name. So these often are interrelated. Now, a lot of the IDNs currently are being registered where I'm seeing you have multiple domain names pointing to the same IP address. You use either version and you end up at the same place. They could do something on the server which could detect how you came in, what links you used, and figure, okay, you want it this way or that way. But there's a lot of overlap. But eventually we might see some places where someone wants to register a domain name, wants to set up a website, they'll just go for their local script. If their customers, if their audience is local and used to using keyboards of their type. The one thing that might slow that down are mobile devices, because mobile phones, many of them aren't really built to handle Arabic or Cyrillic. There's a whole issue with what are called chat alphabets. Like there's an Arabic, various Arabic chat alphabet. It's like transliterating your language. There's Russian versions of that, but that's a topic for another time. Any other questions? Oh, okay, way back there.
You had made a comment, this is more of just a comment, you had made a comment that in China they had been using some Chinese domain names internally. I just wanted to confirm that I'd seen that as well. And you had located query the DNS servers with the Chinese characters. You know, they've been doing this for several years internally.
Yeah,
Mostly with just the .prc or
right, or the .cn.
Right.
Yeah, well, they had, for example, as a regular ID on Google, before it really ran into trouble over there, some issues, little lover spat, or no one from Google here, I hope not. But, you know, so if my Gmail gets a little readjusted, I'll know what. Moving along, looks like, oh, yes, Larkus? Oh, there, okay.
Are you seeing, do you know of any attacks using, not homographic attacks, not the ones that look like the name, but do you know any malware or anything using the Russian or Cyrillic or any other language? You ever heard that before?
Not yet, although I could see it as another layer of obfuscation for people examining malware, especially if it's likely that the people examining it will not really know Russian, or they'll have to find someone.
Do I have anybody that's seen that there? Has there anybody seen that before? Cyrillic or Chinese or traditional? Nobody? Have y'all seen malware like that? Yes or no?
New.
Seen malware using like
Different character sets. Different character sets.
for the domains?
No, I thought when Eric made that statement in 2005, that they did something to hinder you from using different character sets as an attack methodology. Like the next year, I think it was in 2006.
Well, I'm just thinking that as long as something can do an NS lookup, it can actually dial out. It looks like there wouldn't be an issue for programs to use it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I would want to see what happens. One of the things I will mention, Unicode itself has been used to obfuscate in the past, and now it's better known. They're trying to do this to shake off various tools. But there are a lot of creative people in the world, and another thing which could happen is the implementation of the various network tools, the OS's applications, might have their own little glitches, like, you shouldn't do that. Oh, yes, it can. Yes?
I guess to tag off of what Marcus just said, wouldn't there be a problem on a Windows system trying to use another language, or by default, can you use Cyrillic on a machine that's already programmed for an English layout keyboard and the English language?
Yeah, I do it all the time. I can type in my menus on my English Windows is still English. But if I want to type in text, I can, actually, I'm not going to switch to Windows because it's...
But you don't have to make any special changes, like on the fly, in order to change your keyboard over to Cyrillic, to input a Cyrillic character.
It depends on how much you want to do. The easiest way...
The effective method anyway.
Yeah, the easiest way, if you just got a short run and you're sort of familiar with the language, just use a character map. Like I'm bringing up, this is a Linux character map, but Windows has one under Accessories System Tools. Here's Cyrillic, so you just double-click and build your letters. You don't want to write your doctoral thesis in Russian using this. If you do, you're a very patient person. There's other attitudes.
The language packs installed for some of that to work.
Yes.
Language packs, you can't use some of the character sets.
Yeah, that's another issue. One of the things I can show, just a picture, because I've done this. Let me bring this. Snaps. I have a Windows Ultimate at home, and I can switch languages. Downloaded the language packs, so.
What if you don't have a language pack? You can create or send characters through Windows.
You can. It will still handle it, as long as it handles Unicode. It's just how you enter it. You'd have to also set up keyboards. You'd have to define if you want to get your keyboard working. There's settings. It's in Control Panel. There's languages and regional settings. A little too long to explain here, but here just to quickly show.
Can you also just do alt and send numeric keypad sequences to do it? It's a pain, but
I haven't really done it for Unicode. I used to do it a lot for extended ASCII.
there's a way of doing it for Unicode also. It just, I don't know enough of the numbers to be able to do anything with it.
Oh, by the way, what I brought up is a Russian desktop. And one of the things that's very interesting in Windows of recent vintages, when you have it set for another language and you bring up Windows Explorer, your sections like my music, my downloads, my documents will be in that language. The interesting thing is underneath, if you went into command line and did a directory, went under user and went under the person's ID, it's still in Latin alphabet. It's still, but to make it easier for the people using it, they sort of put a little translator. I'll show one more screen because this is both cool, but it can be disorientating to people. This is why I do it before people have too much to drink. No. Okay, this is an Arabic desktop. Not expecting you to read it, but what's the first thing you notice?
Windows Media Center? Windows Media Center?
Well, that's, because it's a halfway thing. I didn't buy 100% Arabic. This is with a language pack, but the start button, the menu comes up on the right-hand side because it's a right-to-left language. And it does the same thing as Russian, localize the labels. And that's, let me give you the contact. Oh, yeah.
And one more question.
Sure.
Anybody signing digital certificates with these? I would imagine I'm not communications.
Yeah, I think they'll have to sign it with the punny code. They would sign it for the punny code. I'd have to see how they handle the Unicode label, but punny code would be the way to go.
That was my question. You mentioned it. I can't think of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, but thank you for giving me another thing to look up because that is quite fascinating because this is adjustment. We're going through trying to make it work for people around the world. By the way, that was a truck I saw when I went to Security Besides. Slightly modified graphic, but it was actual company called Trojan Horse, which delivers on contract U.S. mail. Yes. Yes, this was like, I couldn't believe it. I'm driving up, trying to take a picture, hoping no trooper is coming behind me. There's my contact info. You definitely can find me on Twitter. That's my main medium these days, and you can email me. And thank you, Marcus.
I had one more comment. I was thinking, how I see a lot of people blocking like dynamic DNS and all that stuff. Man, if somebody just started running like a dynamic DNS like that, and you just have some random Cyrillic or something, that'd be quite interesting to see how. Well, I guess you could block the IP addresses or whatever, but that'd be kind of interesting attack vector, dynamic DNS, but in a different language.
Hiding things.
Proxy filter. Web proxy filters.
All right, it was a long day. I appreciate everybody for coming. What we're going to do is 9 o'clock is what I think we said. 9 o'clock. So go have something to eat out in the community. I don't know where you're going to eat at. I got to take myself somewhere to eat. So 9 o'clock, make sure you get something in your belly first before you start drinking all this alcoholic beverages, All right, so thank you very much for coming. First day is over with. And thanks.